Hi guys, James at Rampant Lion Reviews again for you today with another beer review. For this one, we are going to head down to Australia once again, and we're going to go to another brewery that I've never tried anything from before. Now, these guys are another relatively new addition to their local beer scene, but they've built up a very good reputation across Australia from what I understand, and the beer we're going to have a look at today is a style that they are very, very well known for actually. I told my friend Sam from Short and Stout Beer Reviews that I got a hold of a can from this brewery, and he said that I should be pretty stoked about it. So yeah, I'm going to take his word at that and guess that this probably will be a pretty damn good beer. So needless to say, I'm very curious to see what this one's going to have in store for us. Always cool to introduce new Australian breweries here on the channel, and really cool that since I've been in Hong Kong I've had access to a bunch of Canadian, Australian and New Zealand things that I wouldn't have really seen in Europe. So yeah, hopefully this is another good beer. Hopefully it makes for an interesting review, and as always I hope that you guys watching enjoy my take on this one as well. So yeah, for this review then, we are going to head to the state of Victoria in the southeast of Australia. We're going to go to the southeast-ish of Melbourne to a place called Seaford, which is on the Mornington Peninsula, and we're going to have a look then at my first beer from Banks Brewing. So this particular beer is simply called Citra is Life. It comes in at 8.4% ABV, and this one is a New England Hazy Imperial Double, whatever you want to call it, IPA. So yeah, this is another beer that I picked up from the wonderful Gur Beer in the One Mall in Tsim Sha Tsui here in Hong Kong. And yeah, I just hadn't heard of this brewery before. I saw it was Australian and thought, you know, bugger it, why not? It's always cool to review some Australian beer for you here on the channel. And then Sam told me later that I should be very stoked about this, as I said. So I'll put the link to Sam's channel in the video description below. If you want to keep more up to date on the Australian beer scene, then he's the man to watch, and I'll do what I can to try Australian beers. But yeah, single hop Citra New England Hazy Double IPA, this one, you can't go wrong, and this is supposed to be a very, very good Australian hazy brewery. So let's crack on and see what the beer is going to have in store for us. So, as always with my reviews, I'll tell you a little bit about the brewery before we taste the beer. If you want to get straight to the tasting though, just fast forward. All the usual links can be found in the video description below. That's the brewery website, the link to my other reviews that hopefully I can do in the future from Banks Brewing. Very first time I'm trying one of their beers, as I mentioned, but there's all the usual social media down there. If you want to see more reviews, do please consider subscribing to the channel. The support that you give is massively appreciated, and remember, you can go into the channel homepage and search for beer using the geography tagging system. So go in there, use the little search bar, put in your hometown, state, county, province, whatever you like. If I've reviewed beers from this area that you search for, they will pop up. Failing that, you can check out the playlist of beers from different countries. You'll find this in the Aussie playlist along with a number of other things, and I do have a good few more Aussie cans in the fridge that I'll be working my way through over the next wee while, so keep your eyes peeled for those, because some interesting breweries that I haven't encountered before coming out of there. But yeah, check out the playlist of beers from other countries too, because there are some really interesting things on the channel these days too. But on to my brewery notes to tell you a little bit then about Banks Brewing. So Banks Brewing, as I mentioned to you already, are based in Seaford on the Mornington Peninsula, which is to the south of Melbourne in Victoria in southeastern Australia. But the brewery dates back to 2016, and it was founded by Chris and Penny Farmer. So Chris had long had a passion for home brewing, and he found himself at a bit of a crossroads when he could either take over his family's business that he'd been running for the last 10 years or branch out on his own and do his own thing, and so he chose to do the latter. Penny has a background in accounting, and so she deals with the business side of the brewery while Chris takes care of the brewing. But the brewery was officially launched as, or officially founded I should say, as Mr. Banks Brewing Company, and the name is a reference to Chris and Penny's chocolate Labrador dog, who was actually named after a character from the Mighty Ducks, which is an American film obviously about hockey. But they very quickly outgrew their first brewery, and so they moved to their current site in Seaford, and apparently they'd originally been brewing using recycled dairy equipment, but this new site was quickly upgraded to have a 1200 litre brew kit and 6 fermentation tanks. They had 3 1200 litres, 2 2400 litres, and then a 3600 litre tank in there. And the fermentation capacity of this facility has been gradually upgraded along with the brewery infrastructure over the last few years. But they've got an on-site tap room as well, which opens from Thursday to Sunday, and apparently they serve pizza. But in 2021, the brewery had to change their name to, or they weren't, it's a longer story, but they changed their name in 2021 from Mr. Banks Brewing Company to Banks Brewery. But this came after a run-in with actor Matthew McConaughey's legal counsel, who objected to the use of the name McConaughey's, and apparently they had just ordered like 60,000 cans to sell a few batches of this beer, and the email came in within about a week or two of them receiving these cans, or a couple of days. From what I understand. So they had 60,000 cans there that potentially they weren't going to be able to use. But they got, the name of this beer resulted in a cease and desist letter. The beer had apparently already been on the market for 2 years and they'd heard nothing, so they thought it was okay. But despite the fact that they probably would have won the legal case according to their own lawyers, and they felt that it wasn't, it didn't make financial sense for them to go ahead and fight it, but it turned into something more positive. Apparently, McConaughey offered to endorse the beer if they gave 10 cents of the sale of every beer to of the beer profits to his charity in the US, which supported homelessness. But aside from the fact that this wasn't an Australian charity, Chris was really quite into this idea because he's a huge fan of Matthew McConaughey, and that's of course why he names a bunch of beers after things that this actor's been involved with. So that very nearly came off, but what scuppered that was apparently some of the fine print of the deal that Matthew McConaughey had with Wild Turkey, because it didn't allow him to endorse another alcohol brand, so that unfortunately was shelved. But the beer was renamed All Right, All Right, All Right, which apparently they were worried about as well. I think that's one of his lines from one of his movies. But this, having to change the name of this beer, also made them think about rebranding, and so they decided to streamline their core range, and they also dropped Mr. from the brewery name as well, and just simply called it Banks Brewing because that was the name of their dog. But as of April 2024, these guys have produced 270 different kinds of beer according to Untappd, and from what I gather, they are best known for their different kinds of New England hazy, whatever you want to call it, IPAs. So yeah, that is everything I can really tell you about Banks Brewing for the moment. If you guys want to learn more about this brewery, you can check out the brewery website, you can follow them on Facebook and Instagram to keep up to date with all the latest goings on, and you can check out the Rate Beer, Untappd and Beer Advocate pages to learn a little bit more about all the different beers that these guys have done. So yeah, interesting history behind this brewery actually. It was quite fun to do the brewery research for this one, and as I say, hopefully we'll try a few more beers from them going forward. But yeah, let's move on and look at the beer itself. So I think this is a half-litre can, which I don't know how usual that is for Australia. The beer that I had from Mountain Culture recently was also a half-litre. So some breweries in Australia are doing 440s, a number of them are doing half-litres. So I'll need to ask Sam if it must just be a little bit of a luck of the draw in Australia actually. But you can see the artwork on this one is very, very simple. Banks Brewing, Citra is Life. I think this is a bit different from their kind of core range artwork. You can see plain silver top on the can. They're a half-litre, like I said. I actually forgot what I paid for this one, to be honest with you. But like I say, it was bought at Gur Beer. Their Instagram page is in the video description below as well. So yeah, let's get this one open. Citra is Life, an 8.4% New England Hazy, Imperial Double, whatever you want to call it, IPA. It's got Citra Pellets and Citra Cryo in it, this one. So yeah, this should be quite nice actually. I'm guessing they're probably going to do a few of these, or if they haven't done so already, Galaxy is Life would have been really interesting, Enigma is Life, because you've got all these lovely Australian hops, but Citra is one of the classic American hops. So yeah, let's see how we get on with this. That's interesting with its colour, look at that. So I think we've got about 80% of the beer out into the glass with that pour. So you can see that it's poured pretty much as you would expect from a New England Hazy. I'm going to say straight away, this isn't the soupiest and gloopiest of New England doubles that I've come across. But we've got 80% of the beer out and into the glass, and you can see that it's poured with somewhere between a half and a 2/3 finger of a frothy white head. You know, you've got some, it's kind of bumpy, the head on this one actually. I'll let you guys have a look at that. You can see the bumpiness of the head in here, but it looks pretty damn nice actually. The colour of this one is very pale as well, and there's a good little bit of visible carbonation actually. But remember, the colour of your beer depends on a few things. One, the type of malts that you use. This goes a long way to determining your EBC rating. Two, length of your wort boil is also going to play a role, because the longer you boil the wort, the more the sugar is caramelised, and thus you get a darker colour of beer. But any barrel aging that you do or adjuncts you put into the beer will affect its colour as well, but you don't often have to care about that when it comes to different kinds of IPAs. But yeah, this is certainly one of the lighter coloured New Englands that I've come across over the last wee while. They're maybe using Australian malt in this one, and that might be the reason why I haven't seen one that is quite this colour before. There are little bits of sediment particle floating around in this one, so this one maybe is not at its absolute freshest, because, you know, obviously it's been imported here to Hong Kong. But it's maybe also, the other thing could be is that it's maybe been stored at a little bit too cold a temperature to cause that fermentation. But yeah, certainly it was a very new release at Gerbier anyway, so I bought this one as fresh as I would have been able to. But yeah, looks the part of a New England hazy, this one. Level haze on this beer, as I say, it's not the soupiest and gloopiest of New Englands I've come across. The level haze depends on the oak content, wheat content, and to a degree what yeast you use with these beers. So yeah, now you know. Yeah, I don't think we really need to say anything else about the appearance of this beer, so let's have a little look at the aroma of this one then and see what it's all about. Oh yeah. First off, the aroma of this beer is pretty soft actually, and it's really nice. I think it's really nicely done. Yeah, it's not the most imposing of aromas, I have to say, from this style, but for me, as I've said on the channel many a time, there are 6 different ways you can go with a New England hazy, or there's 6 elements you should think about. So you've got your kind of farmhousey and yeasty character in there. You've also got your more kind of rye, lean and grainy side of things. Those 2 elements are a little bit more common in American brewed New England IPAs, but you've also got wheaty bitiness, oaty creaminess, barley malt bread, and you've also got your sweeter side of things as well. So those are the 6 elements of flavour you should think about in a New England IPA. For me, this one, when I smell it, it comes across as being quite barley malt leaning, but I'm also getting quite a little bit of the oaty character out of this one. So quite barley malt leaning and quite oaty, I would say. The one thing you have to remember too is that oats and wheat and things like that can be quite different depending on where they're from. European wheat, for example, is quite dry and bitey, whereas in America it's very smooth, but European oats are creamier than American oats. Australian malt is something that I'm still trying to familiarise myself a little bit with, so that will come over time. But yeah, with this beer, it certainly smells to me as if it's more barley malt leaning and more kind of oaty, and it's also got a little touch of sweetness to it, so that's worth bearing in mind with this one as well. So yeah, aroma wise, it's pretty good. Yeah, so let's just break the beer down then and describe the aroma a little bit more in depth. But as I say, very soft, but giving you things that you would certainly expect to this style. So the backbone of the beer is unquestionably that fresh, you know, white bread, hedgehog bread crust. It really is like that. There's a little touch of woodiness to this one, teeny little bit of cracker, but to me that takes a bit of a back seat. There's a little bit of sweet brown bread in there. So yeah, you've got sweeter brown bread in this one. Quite a little bit of white bread as well, actually, coming out of it. So yeah, brown bread, white bread, and then yeah, on top of that, the back of the nose, the more you smell of this one, the more you get some of the wheaty character coming out of this one, and the wheat has a little bit of bitiness to it actually, so that's interesting. So yeah, nice little bit of wheaty bitiness in there. You've also got yeah, nice little bit of wheaty bitiness, and you've also got that little bit of just that nice bit of oaty creaminess as well. And as I've often said, you know, oats are very good indicator of how fresh your New England IPA is. Essentially, the creamier the smell and taste, the fresher the beer is, the drier they are, the older the beer is. But you can smell with this one, it actually comes across as quite fresh, but you do get a little bit of dryness out of this one. So I'm guessing this beer is probably somewhere between like 6 weeks and 2 months old. So not at its absolute prime freshness. You really want to drink IPAs when they're about a month old, because then they've mellowed out really nicely. I think that's the best time for them. But yeah, the OT character in this one is holding up fairly well. Bit creamy, a little bit drier. So, you know, you're getting somewhere in the middle of where it should be. Yeah, so the sweetness that you get out of this one, it's got a little bit of that Werther's Original butter candy, butterscotchy sort of thing. So yeah, the way that it goes together is quite nice in that sense. But yeah, just a little bit of, you know, a little bit of McVitie's Digestive Biscuit, a little bit of Werther's Original, yeah, wee bit of that going on, but not too sweet this one, I have to say. Yeah, let's move on to the hoppy side of things. And you know, Citra, as we know, it's an American hop, 14% alpha acid. It gives you a whole array of different fruits and things, but bit of grapefruit, bit of passion fruit, lovely little bit of mango character as well. And then you've got all these, you know, you've got all these kind of lychee, gooseberry, kind of lemon limey characters that you can get from it too. But yeah, let's look at the green component first. So for me, the green component in this one is quite soft and quite light. So probably using a lot of late addition and dry hopping in this one. And as I've said on the channel before, you have 3 types of hoppings with IPAs. Early addition hopping, which is in the first hour of the wort boil, that gives you most of your bitterness and a deep dank aroma. Late addition hopping, which takes place usually in the last half hour of the wort boil. Most IPAs use about a 90-ish minute wort boil. So in the last 30 minutes, you're going to get a little bit of bitterness, but mainly flavour and aroma. And then the dry hopping, which takes place after the wort boil is complete. That's all about late addition. That's also going to give you a very light, bright aroma, and it's all about the flavour and aroma, to be honest with you too. So yeah, the way everything kind of pieces together and the green component of this beer is quite nice. So it's very soft in this one. You've got the cryo in there, which always gives you a very soft and slightly oily green component. So there's a wee bit of earthiness, a really nice little bit of floral character, a little bit of light grassiness as well. So a bit of earthiness, a little bit of herbal character, some nice floral notes in there, a wee bit of grassiness, and yeah, the aroma that comes out of this one, I think, is really quite nice. So yeah, green component is pretty much what you'd expect, but the softness of it tells you, yeah, late addition and dry hopping. The fruity side of this beer is pretty much what you'd expect as well, but it's leaning more toward the tropical side of things, because the thing you have to remember about hops is they will behave slightly differently depending on what yeast you use with them and what malt base they are. So for example, Citra in a West Coast IPA is going to show a lot more of its lemon and limey character, whereas in the New England IPA it's going to lean a little bit more toward its kind of mango, pineapple, sort of apricot-y type notes, and that's kind of what you're getting in here. So the aroma out of this one, you do get a little touch of the grapefruit, you get a bit of the very juicy peach. There's a lot of kind of juicy and ripe mango in this one though, so peach, mango, I think as well. You're getting the softer apricots, the juicy pineapples for sure. And there is a wee bit of I'm getting a wee bit of gooseberry out of this one, and a wee touch of the kind of lemony limey character. So you're getting a whole array of the different things you can get from Citra, because this Citra in here is in the pellet form and in the cryo form. So yeah, I really like how that pieces together in this one. It gets a thumbs up from me. So yeah, the way everything goes together in this one, I think is really nice. So yeah, I think this beer goes together really pretty nicely. So I think take a little bit of time to enjoy the aroma of the beer before you get stuck into it. That's always half the experience when it comes to craft beer. But yeah, I think we should have a taste of this one and see what it's all about. So yeah, this is the Citra is Life, an 8.4% New England Hazy, Imperial Double, whatever you want to call it, IPA from Banks Brewery in Seaford, Victoria, Australia. Let's get stuck into this one, and a big shout out to my good friend Sam of Short and Stout Beer Reviews. Slàinte, skål, cheers. going to say straight away, that's pretty bloody good. It's quite interesting because it takes a different approach to its flavour and the way the flavour comes out, but that's damn good. So thumbs up to Banks Brewery. This is quite an interesting one because you take the beer in and it's got a wee bit of bite to it, but then as you go into the aftertaste, it really starts to lean toward the softer, juicier side. It's almost, this beer's really interesting because it almost has a little bit of like the sake type sweetness. When you take sake in, you get a lot of the sweetness of the rice out in the aftertaste. I love my Japanese sake, of course, and the sweetness that I'm getting out of this is almost a little bit like what you get from sake. So yeah, it's this is pretty damn interesting actually. It doesn't tell you anything about the malts in this beer right enough, but you could tell me that there was a bit of sake rice used in the fermentation in this one, and I'd probably believe you, to be quite honest. Yeah, if you take this beer in, it's really kind of floral and it has a bit of bite in the beginning, but it mellows out and becomes very juicy and slightly oily and sweet into the aftertaste. So yeah, the way that all of that goes together, I think, is really, really interesting. But it's a beautiful IPA, this one, and you know, I'd be curious to see whether they've got more of these this, you know, Is Life series, because this is pretty damn good. If they can do a single hop IPA this well, I'd be very curious to see what they do when they, you know, they look at it from more of a flavour perspective, when they're a bit more creative, if you like. So yeah, this is good. This is very, very good. Yeah, let's break this one down then and describe the flavour a wee bit more in depth. The other thing I'm getting out of this beer is that it gives you a little bit more wheaty bite into the aftertaste as well. So that's worth noting, but as I say, it's pretty fucking good. So, middle third of your palate then. Let's start there as we always do. The backbone of the beer, you've got that lovely kind of fresh white bready bread crust in there. I don't know if I'd go as far as hedgehog for this one. It does feel like a little bit more of a just straight up fresh white bready loaf. As you move further forward on that middle third of your palate, you get a little hint of like a slight woodiness in there. Then you have like a kind of crackery wafer type layer sitting above the bread crust. Above that you start to get the bread, and there's maybe a few layers inside the bready character to this one. So you've got a more wholemeal, like a sweet brown bready character coming out of the beer. So a sweet kind of wholemeal brown bready character in here. So yeah, sweeter wholemeal brown bready character in there. Above that, you start to get the white bread, but the white bready side of this one's quite sweet as well, to be honest with you. The bread that you're getting in the middle of the palate here has a good little bit of density to it, which I do quite like. But yeah, the further up that you go, it's the further up that you go, it's got a wee bit more of a you start to get the next layer up. You've got the brown bread and the white bread, which are a bit denser. Then you've got the wheaty layer, which is a bit more bitey actually. And as you go further into the aftertaste, the beer does show a little bit more of its wheaty character, like I mentioned. So next up, you've got the wheaty layer, which has that little bit of bite to it for sure. So yeah, the way that that pieces together is quite, really is quite nice. And on the, the way that all of that just kind of goes together, I think is really, really good. So the wheaty layer, it gets a little bit more bitey toward the back of that middle third of your palate, but you've also got the oaty layer sitting above that, and the oaty layer is quite interesting. This beer is pretty fresh. It's not that old, as I say. I think it's about 6 weeks or 2 months old, just going by the flavours. And that's just from experience. But yeah, if you go down the middle line of your palate, you can feel the oats are quite nice and creamy. But as you move out toward the edges of your palate, it does have a little bit of the oaty dryness. And as I say, that's the kind of giveaway that the beer is not, within the kind of 1 month bracket actually. But it's not too old, this one. And even if, regardless of what age it is, I think it's pretty solid. Like it's got some numbers here on the can, but to be quite honest, I really can't make those out. Yeah, I've no idea what that says. The numbers aren't really legible. But still, regardless of how old this beer actually is, I think it's pretty damn good condition. So we've described the oaty layer. The only other thing to add is, like I say, this beer gives you a little bit of an almost rice type sweetness. It reminds me of a few of the IPAs that I had from Dugges Brewery back in Sweden. And I know that for a few of those, they like to use a little bit of like rice in the malt base just to give you that wee bit of sweetness. It actually works quite well with New England's in my experience. But yeah, I'm getting a wee bit of an almost like ricey sweetness there in the middle third of the palate, but in the dead centre of your tongue, and as you would expect from the 8.4% alcohol, you're getting that wee bit of sweetness. It's got a little bit of that Werther's Original butter candy, butterscotchy type thing going on. So yeah, the malt base in this one I think is really nicely done. But that's the middle third of your palate, and I think we've covered that. So let's go to the back third of your palate then. As I've often said, the back third of your palate is going to give you similar flavours to the middle third of your palate, just at different intensities. But do remember, drier and more bitter flavours come out further back, sweeter flavours come out further forward. So the border region between middle and back third of your palate, you get a little bit of bready build up in there, a wee bit of brown bread, wee bit of white bread, a little bit of wheat on the top. The base of that back third of your palate, you've got the kind of bread crusty characters in there, and you've got the the kind of crusty sort of notes coming out of it. Then you've got the brown bready layer above that, so you can feel that's a little bit lighter and a little bit more airy, which I do really quite like as well. Then you've got the white bready layer above that, which again is a bit lighter and more airy, but these two layers are a bit more dry. Then you've got the wheaty character which sits above that, which is just a little bit more sort of bitey, if you like. So yeah, that's really interesting. And above everything else on that back third of your palate, you're starting to get the yeasty notes out of the beer. So for me, the yeasty side of things with this one, it's the yeasty side of this beer is quite it's interesting because you've got that more dense brown bread. In the middle of that yeasty character, you've got that dense brown bready sort of thing out of this one. But then you've got the white bready character around that and a wee bit of a kind of more rusticy, farmhousey bread crust. But definitely on the back third of your palate, you can feel that you can certainly feel that the flavour is taller, and then as you move further forward into the middle third of your palate, it just kind of condenses down and squashes together that little bit more. But I think at this point we've covered all of the malty and yeasty side of the beer. The green component in this one, this is not an overly bitter beer. I mean, New England hazy IPAs, you don't expect them to be that bitter. But in the back corners of your palate, you've got a little bit of earthiness there. As you move further forward, you do get a little bit of herbal character, but that's kind of minimal. And as you push toward the kind of front corners of your palate, you get a little bit more of a kind of rich, piney, resinous thing out of this one. So rich kind of piney, resinous character in there. And you also have that rich piney resinous character, and you've also got a little bit more of a kind of floral aromatic spice as you reach the kind of front corners of your palate. So that's really nice for me, this one. And round the front curve of your tongue, you've got a little bit of that lighter grassy sort of thing for sure. So the way all of that pieces together, I think, is really nice. So I think that covers the green component. As I say, I'm just getting more I'd really love to know if there's a little bit of rice in the malt base of this, because the way the sweetness comes across is really nice. It might just be the type of oats and the yeast, right enough, and that's probably more likely than them using rice, to be quite frank. But yeah, there's just something about this beer that reminds me of some of the ones I had from Dugas Brewery a couple of years back. But yeah, on the front third of the palate then, the fruity side of the beer, so the border region between front third and middle third of your palate, you get a little bit of brown bread in the base, a little bit of white bread on the top, and a wee bit of the wheatiness there. But the base of the front third of the palate, again, you've got the bread crust, the brown bread, the white bread, both of which are quite sweet, and a wee bit of the smoother side of the wheat. And then you've got that nice oily bubble where the juicy fruity esters just roll their way out of the beer. So for me, the fruity side of this beer is kind of what you'd expect from a Citra hop. The more you drink of the beer, the more it shows you the kind of stronger side as well. So the sweeter, the fruity side of this beer is quite nice. Like at the back of that, front third of your palate, you do get a little bit of a grapefruity note out of this one. So yeah, nice little bit of a grapefruity character there, but that's quite minimal actually. I think it takes a bit of a back seat, but quite a little bit of peach. I'm getting quite a bit of that sharper peachy note in there. Then as you move further forward, a lot of juicy mango, like quite a ripe mango, and then softer passion fruit and apricot and stuff as you reach the middle of the palate. You're certainly certainly getting a good little bit of pineapple out of this one too, particularly in the aftertaste. You get the drier apricot and pineapple type flavours. But yeah, in the beginning, it's more about the sharper peach and the juicy mango and passion fruit. I think that's definitely fair to say with this one. Yeah, I think if you move into the front half of the front third of your palate, I think the beer, it's interesting because it's definitely showing a little bit more of its kind of lemony, limey character. You certainly get a wee bit more of a citrusy zest as you move into the front half of that front third of your tongue. But yeah, the way everything just kind of pieces together in this one, I think, is really, really nice, and that gets a big thumbs up from me. Yeah, I really like how all of this just kind of pieces together. Actually, it's a really, really nicely done beer, this one. And as I say, this one is a Citra single hop, which is a classic take on the IPA. So they've built a really nice malt base around the Citra hop and made this a really, really enjoyable beer. What this beer does is makes me very curious about, you know, something a bit more, where they take a bit more of a creative approach and say, oh, we're going to use these hops and go for these flavours rather than build the beer around the Citra hop, actually. So I'd be curious to try another IPA from them that isn't from this kind of, I don't know if the Is Life is a series, but yeah, that isn't single hop. But you know, this is a very, very good first impression of the brewery, we can say that for sure. Let's round off this one then with a wee look at the mouthfeel. So for me, this beer is top end to mid-bodied. The carbonation is has a little bit of a prickle to it, but I think, as I say, this beer might be about 2 months old, so maybe it's kind of to do with that. It could even be older than that, I honestly don't know. I don't know how long it takes for the Australian beers to get up here, but yeah, there's a little bit of a prickle to the carbonation. The beer's got a wee bit of an oily character to it, but also a little bit of smoothness. I think it would actually be a little bit creamier if it was in its prime freshness. The IBU count in this beer, I think this one's about 40 or 50 IBUs. The bitterness certainly builds in this one, the further into the aftertaste that you go. So yeah, bit of a kind of building, yeah, more of a bigger bitterness the further into the aftertaste that you go. But yeah, the malty base in this one, you've got a really nice kind of, in the base, you've got a wee bit of a more bread, you know, that drier bread crusty character, the kind of sweeter bready notes in the middle of your palate. And then yeah, above that, you've got a wee bit more of the kind of smoothness, creaminess and sweetness out of this one. So yeah, all in all, it's really quite interesting. Yeah, on the fruity side of things, as I say, it leans really toward that tropical side of note, but in the aftertaste you do certainly get a little bit more of the kind of citrusy zest out of it. And yeah, so into the aftertaste it's more floral, spicy, and slightly more citrusy and zesty. But as I say, beautiful IPA this one, so big, massive thumbs up to it, to Banks Brewing for this. This has been pretty awesome to try. So yeah, let's leave it at that for this one. This was the Citra is Life, an 8.4% New England Hazy Imperial Double, if you want to call it IPA, from Banks Brewing in Seaford on the Mornington Peninsula, to the south of Melbourne in Victoria, Australia. Another very good Australian beer, and like I say, really cool to be able to review more Aussie stuff for you here on the channel since I arrived in Hong Kong. So yeah, until the next time, thank you for watching beer reviews. Please like, subscribe, share, all the usual YouTube stuff. Let me know your own thoughts on this beer in the comment section below. Let me know what your favourite beers are from Banks Brewery as well, and we will no doubt return to these guys again at some point in the very near future. But until then, slàinte, skål, cheers, and see you guys later. Ciao just now.